This is Exhibit a Crime, where every mystery leaves a trace, every crime has a story, and every case has a secret waiting to be uncovered. Let's open the case file. Boston, Massachusetts. Just after midnight on March 18, 1990, the city was quiet. Most people were asleep. The streets were nearly empty, and inside one of Boston's most unusual museums, the priceless works of some of history's greatest artists hung peacefully on the walls. There was no reason to believe that anything was about to change. But before the night was over, 13 works of art would disappear, and more than 3 decades later, they would still be missing. No bodies, no ransom demand, no confirmed location, just empty frames hanging on the walls, as if the paintings had vanished into thin air. This is the story of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist, one of the most mysterious art thefts in history. And perhaps the strangest part of the story is that the thieves did not simply steal paintings. They stole them from a museum designed almost like a private home. A place filled with courtyards, narrow hallways, ancient objects, and masterpieces arranged according to the personal taste of one extraordinary woman, Isabella Stewart Gardner. Born into wealth in New York in 1840, Gardner became one of the most influential art collectors of her generation. But she wasn't interested in simply owning beautiful objects. She wanted to create an experience. When she established her museum in Boston, she designed it as a kind of European palace, inspired heavily by Venice. Paintings, sculptures, furniture, tapestries, books, and ancient artifacts filled the rooms. And there was one important rule. Nothing was to be rearranged after her death. Her museum was supposed to remain exactly as she had designed it. More than a century later, that decision would make the empty spaces left behind by the thieves even more haunting. Because after the robbery, the museum chose not to replace the stolen paintings. Instead, the empty frames remained. They still hang there today, a reminder of what disappeared. But to understand how one of the greatest art thefts in history could happen, we have to go back to the night of the robbery. It was around 1:20 in the morning. 2 men approached the museum. They were dressed as police officers. At first, there was nothing unusual about their appearance. The guards working inside the museum believed they were legitimate officers responding to some kind of disturbance. The men told the guards they were investigating a problem, and the guards made a terrible mistake. They opened the door. Once inside, the 2 men revealed their true intentions. They were not police officers. They were thieves. The guards were quickly overpowered, handcuffed, and taken to the basement. And suddenly, the museum belonged to the criminals. There were no alarms screaming through the building, no police rushing through the halls, just 2 men moving through one of the most valuable collections in the world. They knew where they were going. And that raises one of the biggest questions surrounding the case. How much did they know? Because the thieves didn't simply wander through the museum grabbing whatever looked expensive. They targeted specific rooms, specific paintings, specific works of art. Among the stolen pieces was a painting by Rembrandt, one of the most famous artists in history. It was his only known seascape. The painting was called The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. It showed a small fishing boat struggling against violent waves. The image itself was almost symbolic, a fragile vessel caught in a storm. Another stolen work was also by Rembrandt, a self-portrait. The thieves took works by Degas as well. They stole sketches and paintings depicting dancers, and they took a work by Manet. In total, 13 works disappeared. The estimated value today is hundreds of millions of dollars. But the museum has never treated the case as simply a financial loss. These were irreplaceable works of art. They could not simply be bought again. And yet, perhaps the strangest part of the robbery was not what the thieves took. It was what they left behind. They passed over other valuable objects. They ignored works that could have been worth enormous amounts of money. They did not empty the museum. Instead, they selected a relatively small number of pieces. Then came another bizarre detail. In several cases, the thieves did not carefully remove the paintings from their frames. They cut them out. Canvas was sliced away. Frames were damaged. In one case, the thieves even took the frame itself. Why? Was it because they were inexperienced? Were they in a hurry? Or did they know exactly what they were doing? For decades, investigators have tried to answer that question. And there is something almost haunting about visiting the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum today. The museum is still there. The courtyard is still there. The rooms are still filled with extraordinary works of art. But in certain places, you can see the empty frames. They have never been replaced. The empty spaces have become part of the museum itself. Visitors stand in front of them and look at nothing. And somehow, that nothing becomes the most fascinating thing in the room. Because an empty frame tells a story. It tells you that something was once there. Something important. Something valuable. Something that someone wanted badly enough to risk everything to steal. And then it tells you something even stranger. Nobody knows where it went. More than 30 years have passed since that night. People who were young when the robbery happened are now grandparents. Investigators have retired. Suspects have died. The world has changed. Technology has transformed the way police investigate crimes. Yet the paintings remain missing. That is what makes this case so compelling. It isn't simply an unsolved robbery. It is a mystery that has survived time. And perhaps the biggest question is not who stole the paintings. We have theories about that. The real question is, where are they now? Imagine for a moment that one of those paintings is still hidden somewhere. Imagine that it has been wrapped carefully and placed inside a forgotten storage room. Decades pass. Dust gathers. People move in and out. The owner dies. The building changes hands. And the painting remains. Silent. Waiting. No one around it knows what it is. Or perhaps someone does know. Perhaps somewhere in the world, there is a person who has information that could finally solve the mystery. Someone who knows where the paintings went. Someone who knows who ordered the robbery. Someone who knows why 13 works of art disappeared from a museum in the middle of Boston. If that person exists, they have remained silent for decades, and that silence may be the reason the mystery continues. There is also something fitting about the fact that the museum has preserved the empty frames. Isabella Stewart Gardner wanted her museum to remain unchanged. She wanted her arrangement of art to survive her. And in a strange, unintended way, the thieves became part of that legacy. Their crime permanently altered the museum. The empty frames became part of its identity. The missing paintings became part of its history. Every visitor who sees those empty spaces is reminded of the same unresolved story. A door opened. 2 men walked inside. 13 works disappeared. And then, nothing. No final explanation. No dramatic discovery. No moment when the police arrived at a hidden warehouse and found every missing masterpiece waiting inside. Just an enormous, unanswered question. Where are the Gardner paintings? Maybe one day, the answer will finally emerge. Maybe a painting will suddenly appear. Maybe someone will come forward. Maybe a forgotten photograph, document, letter, or piece of evidence will reveal what happened that night. And when that day comes, the empty frames may finally tell a different story. But until then, they remain exactly what they have been for decades. Silent witnesses. Reminders of a crime that should have been impossible. A museum designed to preserve history became the scene of one of history's greatest mysteries. And somewhere beyond its walls, 13 stolen works of art may still be waiting to be found. The storm on the sea is still missing. The dancers are still missing. The portraits are still missing. And the mystery is still open.